Aloha, I'm Joshua Cooper, and welcome to Cooper Union, what's happening with human rights around our world on ThinkTech Live, broadcasting from our downtown studio in Honolulu, Hawaii, and Moana Nui Akea. Today, we'll be looking at service and solidarity for Ukraine, securing the UN Sustainable Development Goals during war, and looking at United Help Ukraine, creating compassion around the global community. Aloha. United Help Ukraine helps people and saves lives. United Help Ukraine provides people of Ukraine with critical support, enabling survival in the face of great adversity, while rebuilding the future to thrive. And most important, UHK covers all the Sustainable Development Goals, providing humanitarian assistance throughout the war, and really does have a human rights-based approach. Maryna, thank you so much for joining us. And can you share with us, what was your inspiration to create and organize this United Help Ukraine?
Hi, Josh, and thank you for having me on your show. United Help Ukraine started in 2014. We are based in Washington, D.C. area, and in 2014, during the Maidan Revolution, or Revolution of Dignity in Ukraine, that was the winter of 2013-2014, people started coming to the streets in Washington, D.C., protesting, rallying, calling for action. And when the war started, we think of the war with Russia, or the war that Russia started in 2022, in February of 2022. That's not the case. The war started in 2014. In March of 2014, Russia illegally annexed Crimea. And this is when a group of activists here in Washington, D.C. started going to the White House, calling for action, because we all knew that that was just the beginning. The war just started then. Ukraine at that time could not fight. Crimea, if you look at the map, it's a huge territory. It's a big peninsula, and it's a big part of Ukraine. At that time, Ukrainian army was not able to withstand Russian force, so Crimea was taken illegally. And then the war started in Donbass and Donbass region. That's Donetsk and Lugansk regions in Ukraine. And this is where we started helping out. First, as volunteers, as activists, we would gather supplies. We would do our own individual fundraising events on Facebook. We'll call friends. On a bigger level, we would call our representatives and ask that we need to do something on as an administration, as a country. And then at some time during the summer and fall of 2014, we realized we can do much better, much more as an organization. And we became 501c3 nonprofit organization. Since 2014, we always had 4 major initiatives. So the first one, we were helping Ukrainian defenders. And we were helping with all kinds of humanitarian aid. As you said, our slogan is helping people, saving lives. So we tried our best to provide tactical medicine to the front lines, something that would immediately help Ukrainian defenders to survive in combat. Then we provided other things that would help Ukrainian armies, such as uniforms, boots, you name it, anything humanitarian. We in the past almost 9 years, we've provided. The second big part for us was help people who were internally displaced or refugees. So at that time in 2014, there were about over 1.6 million people displaced from Donetsk and Lugansk region. And they were displaced within Ukrainian territory. It's very different from what we see now. We see now so many refugees that are fleeing to other neighboring countries. Some of them remain, or some of them actually return to Ukraine. So helping internally displaced people has always been one of our mission and one of our focuses. Number 3 was medical aid. And we helped hospitals, rehabilitation centers. We provided training for doctors, and we also provided psychological aid to those warriors, those defenders who would come and help them integrate with their family, understand the problems that defenders go through when they come back from the action. And number 4, how we started, you have a question?
Oh, I love the medical aspect. I know it is your second largest engagement. Can you share some positive examples of getting this medical aid and the difference that it made in the lives of people in Ukraine? Because many people would really want to know examples of being able to get syringes, ventilators, other life-saving operating room equipment, triage training, all those aspects. Could you give us some examples of how that has made a difference and saved lives?
Absolutely. So since 2014, this program has been one of our largest with rehabilitation equipment, medical equipment. But in 2022, on a global scale, our organization has grown dramatically, and so did all of our programs. Just an example, and I know people respond better to numbers. So last year in 2022 alone, we've provided a medical aid worth $15.8 million, just our small organization. And what type of aid? So that was everything that you just said, from medical equipment, from large, small medical equipment that was necessary to hospitals, to all kinds of supplies. And what we supply, if you think about the territory of Ukraine, we know the east is heavily shelled. So we supply all the stabilization centers in the eastern part of Ukraine. This is where the wounded get transported immediately. Then there are evacuation vehicles that would take them to the second line, where they will have more professional help. And then there is a third line of hospitals closer to the western border of Ukraine, where it's a bit more safer, although, we see that Russian missiles hit everywhere in Ukraine, so no one is safe. But at least in that part, patients usually receive more professional care, so it's more tertiary care. They will need more specialized equipment. And I will tell you a couple of examples how we operate. We've received a call from a surgeon in Kharkiv hospital saying, at the moment, we have one operating room. We need 3. What can we do? So we get a list of supplies that you have an empty operating room. We get everything that needs to be in that operating room. So for the surgeon to start operating immediately. So that includes anesthesia machine, operating lamps, table, portable x-ray machine. So everything that we have on the list for that specific hospital to equip the entire operating room that might receive, tens of people per day. So if we think about casualties, we don't know exact number, but from the ground, we hear one single hospital might receive from 80 to 100 wounded per day. And that's just one hospital. So those numbers are quite, scary and dramatic. And we know that the hospitals will need a lot of materials, a lot of equipment, and supplies to run nonstop, 24/7, with this really high number of patients. So that's one example. Then we have a group of volunteer doctors. Think about people who work 5-day shifts in their own hospitals. Then Friday night, they get together close to the front lines, and they go for the weekends to the deoccupied territories, providing help to remote villages that were just recently liberated from Russian army. And they would have vehicles full of medicine, portable devices, which we provide, like portable ultrasound, portable monitors, portable ventilation systems in case of patients would need transportation from that village to the hospital in mainland. So with this group of doctors, it's really inspiring to see a lot of young doctors, a lot of young professionals who volunteer their own time, their energy, their talent, go and receive patients. And they also receive a lot of patients because think about the people in those villages being under occupation for months, 6 months, 7 months. They didn't receive basic care. They didn't receive basic medicine. So we help supply equipment and some of the other things like generators, for example. That's another big thing that all of us heard over the winter, right? Because Russia was targeting infrastructure. So our organization provided generators not only for defenders and remote villages and humanitarian aid. For hospitals, we provided large units that would be able to supply energy for entire surgical unit or ICU or other department within the entire hospital. Also, portable generators to the organization, like I just told you about, Frida, with volunteer doctors who would go to those remote villages, and oftentimes they wouldn't have electricity. So everything like ultrasound, EKG machine would run on the generator. And we've supplied quite a few of those. In the past year, I think we purchased and supplied over 850 generators of different sizes and capacity.
That's exciting. And that also then shows how you move also into humanitarian aid, looking at how you're able to focus on alleviating food insecurity and providing access to clean water in besieged areas. I think that's really important because the UN Sustainable Development Goals looks at just those: SDG 1, no poverty; number 2, zero hunger; 3, good health and well-being. Your humanitarian aid, could you build on that a bit more? Because I know it differentiates slightly from the medical aid, but I think it's equally important, especially on food security. I'm not sure if you're partnering with World Food Center or World Central Kitchen or able to work with them, but we know you're doing a lot. And of course, those meals matter so much to people facing the conflict that they are surviving through.
Right, that's another focus of our organization of United Help Ukraine, humanitarian aid. And you're absolutely right. We have partnered, but not with large organizations, but we've partnered with small local nonprofit organizations, Ukrainian organizations. They know best where that help is needed at any given moment. And they know best how to respond it in the fast and very effective way. So we have provided food and hygienic supplies, again, focusing on those territories that were liberated, recently liberated or deoccupied territories. And then we would send grants. We would work on the grant opportunities for small Ukrainian nonprofit organizations to actually buy supplies within Ukraine. Because Ukraine, if you think about in general how Ukraine is still very much agricultural country, we've supplied 20% or more of grain worldwide. We still do a lot of grain export, despite Russians blocking the ports, blocking the ships from leaving the ports. In Crimea, still, we're still producing quite a bit of food within Ukraine. And so having local NGOs, knowing the sources, buying locally from local producers and manufacturers, we try to help alleviate the humanitarian crisis and make sure there is food security in especially the occupied territories. But at the same time, we try to see how we can build local economy a little, and invest in the local economy a little better. So local NGO will buy supplies locally and distribute them locally exactly where it's needed. So in the last year, in 2022, we've provided humanitarian aid worth over $7 million. And again, that's a lot of it is food packages. We've supplied water, especially in some regions like Mykolaiv, for example. They relied heavily on clean water supplies that was provided by an organization that received a grant from United Help Ukraine. And that's pretty much giving tons of water a day per day to an entire mid-sized city.
Could you give maybe some insight on how you transport that water? Because it seems like such a formidable task and it's so life-saving. Could you share a little bit more on that, if that's possible?
Right. So the water there were special large plastic tanks purchased for that particular project. There were several large trucks that would contain those large tanks of water. And then they would just bring in every day. They would have it's a long trip, get the clean water, come to the city, and then you would see. We have some footage and some pictures on our website if your audience is interested to look at how people would just have those plastic jars, just come to that water supply, get it for a day, have it, bring it home, and then come back the next day when there's another truck ready with, full of water, ready to distribute it in this particular region, which was shelled at that time constantly. So Mykolaiv region is one that has been hit quite heavily. And that's the reason that there was no running water, because Russians hit the water supply and that was damaged, unfortunately. So we try to respond to things that are happening on the ground almost immediately. We know where the need is because a lot of volunteers who work for our organization, who volunteer for United Help Ukraine, we have connections. We have a network of organizations and volunteers in Ukraine. We've built logistics, and we have now 3 large warehouses in Western Ukraine that constantly receive containers with medical supplies, tactical medicine, humanitarian aid coming in. And then from there, it would be distributed pretty much throughout Ukraine, all the regions in Ukraine. Most of the regions in Ukraine, we've helped one way or another with humanitarian and medical supplies.
No, it's so impressive to see the initiatives that you've been able to coordinate. And of course, that long-term perspective since 2014, with so few people understanding the entire aspect, the consequences, and how this has been going on. One important recent development sort of goes along with your project on Smuha, looking at families and children, but the International Criminal Court judges just issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin over alleged war crimes. And those arrest warrants were issued for the Russian leader and his children's rights commissioner for the unlawful deportation of Ukrainian children. And it looked at that larger issue. Who are the children being taken by Russia and what's going on and what are these children facing? But could you share a little bit how that connects with Smuha, which is addressing the mental health of children and families impacted by the war?
Right. I think a lot of us were happy to see that the warrant to arrest Putin has been issued. It just signals that there will be justice. And a lot of us want to see that justice hopefully soon. What we see in terms of post-war trauma with children, it's really devastating. We started this program to help children with post-war traumas to rehabilitate and kind of cope better with this trauma back in March. At that time, we've identified an Israeli intervention method, hibuki, which was a toy therapy for children. We've trained over 200 psychologists in Ukraine. We've provided the toy because there was a special intervention with the toy that kids would hug. Hibuki in Hebrew means hug. So the special toy has an instruction that psychologist goes through with the child and parents. So children can get their emotions, their fears and anxiety projected to this therapy dog. And over 200 patients, 200 psychologists were working with patients. We've delivered over 6,000 of those interventions in Ukraine. And this project just showed us the massive scale of this issue of post-war anxiety. Even it's not post-war, but it's post-war trauma for children. But kids who were sitting in bomb shelters for weeks, not seeing daylight. Children who go to bomb shelters every day, multiple times a day, just because of the air sirens you would hear pretty much 2-3 times in the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. I was there in December. We heard, sirens every single day. And one of the days I was there, there were over 40 missiles launched just against Kiev alone, just one city, 40 strikes. Luckily, they were all taken down by air defense system, but children who hear that, who are living through this, they have really severe anxiety, psychological issues. And what we tried to do back in last year, right, so it was a year ago, to help them cope. And Smuha is something that came out of this initiative. We are now expanding it, and we're bringing in parents, not just children, parents who also need some psychological support. And also they need to understand how to talk to their children, with children who are suffering from fear, anxiety, sleep disorders, and so many other things that we understand this war will bring. And so with all this, we're expanding it. Adolescent population, so adolescent kids, it's another very vulnerable population. And if you think about adolescent or teenagers, they have problems on their own, in our peaceful times right here in the US. We always talk about teenagers as a problematic category of kids. Think about everything that they have to go through in Ukraine on top of what they go through as a normal teenager. So we're expanding this program, and we're also hoping to expand it more to include those soldiers who would come back at some point, hopefully soon, with PTSD. And we understand that that's going to be also an issue for so many families, coping with their loved ones who are having PTSDs and who are going to be undergoing some serious psychological and mental problems for years, right? So this is something we think about the war. If it stops tomorrow, yes, it will take time to rebuild infrastructural buildings, etc., but it will take even longer time to rebuild human lives. And that's the reason that we as an organization are focusing and trying to help immediately with those needs that are already on the ground.
We appreciate you sharing. It's a holistic approach to health, which is absolutely essential. And what is so important is you really looking at the long term. I know there's so much on people's minds, there's so much to consider, but it's amazing what you're able to accomplish as a grassroots volunteer-based group. In just 8 years, you've been able to develop important relationships with Ukrainian NGOs on the ground, hospitals, with families. And I think it's great that you're a trusted partner to really make sure that aid's being delivered. But more importantly, it seems like you're focusing on the individuals, then extending it to the family, then the community being impacted by the conflict, and the entire country of Ukraine. Could you share with us a bit of next steps of where you're thinking you'll be able to provide more to the people and insights on more initiatives that be headed up?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question, Josh, because what we were able to do, like you said, in the last year, we've grown so much and all our programs have grown. And that's because of the supporters. A lot of the supporters within the US, global supporters. Our small organization, we're local in Washington, D.C. area, we were able to provide aid for over $55 million in both monetary and in-kind donations, right? And what it shows really is that people of United States, people here in the States are very much supportive. They understand the issues, and they understand that Ukraine right now is fighting not only for itself, its own sovereignty, but Ukraine is fighting pure evil and fighting for democratic values. Ukraine is standing against the evil, but also protecting all the neighboring countries. We don't know, like a lot of times that we hear from our Polish friends or Estonian friends who think that we might be next because we also have a border with Russia or Belarus. So in this sense, what I'm trying to say is that support will be needed until the war is over, but support will also be needed a lot when the war, it stops, and then you would have a lot of initiatives to rebuild. And it's, again, from many different aspects. Rebuilding will be in different aspects. And that's what we're trying to focus right now. We're trying to find some sustainable projects, some initiatives that help us see how we can help after the war. For example, our medical aid program, we're thinking about expanding some of the training, not just physicians and doctors, but also managing personnel, how people react to a mass casualty event, to a chemical attack, to any other mass casualty event. Could be a massive airstrike, a missile hitting the train station, or a massive car accident, right? So with this, understanding the protocols and building on the knowledge that Ukraine has right now and Ukrainian doctors and managers have right now will be crucial. So training to understand how we can efficiently prolong lives of patients in Ukraine, but also make sure that the life that patients lead are it's really fulfilled and also filled with joy. People can contribute to their communities. I think that's absolutely essential to rebuild Ukraine better.
No, and it's excellent. You're covering the aspect of joy all the way to justice. And as you said, it's really looking at a culture of rule of law, of human rights, of democracy, to make sure that we prevent future conflicts, which is the whole point of the UN, was to end the scourge of war, but to make sure, of course, that if anything anywhere happens to someone, that it impacts all of us. And it shows, while you talked about sustainability, it's also that spirit of solidarity that's absolutely essential, because you can see with Belarus, you can see with the most recent discussions taking place, that it's really a stance of people standing for fundamental freedoms, who demand an end to fear and wanting to make sure that those basic human rights can be achieved by all people, as well as the UN 2030 agenda of the 17 global goals. So we really do appreciate your dedication to democracy, to understanding that Ukraine is just one part, but that we have to take action together for the people on the front lines today. United Helping Ukraine does strive to serve as a leading voice for people under constant human rights violations. And you also partner with institutions in Ukraine to ensure that people remain free, that there's democracy, that there's independence, but also an interdependence with the international community to achieve those 17 global goals. In closing, could you share with us a bit of next steps in solidarity and for sustainability?
You brought up some really good points, and something that we envision as an organization for our future steps. What we see is only working together with communities and institutions, first of all, here in the US. And we understand that American people have shown absolutely incredible generosity and willingness to help. And there were so many instances where people were coming to us, to our organization, donating their time, money, and talent. And this is what's going to be crucial, that the world comes together and supports Ukraine for years to come. Just like you said, only in solidarity, only standing together, we can, first of all, stop this war, and rebuild and make sure that the peace continues in that region and globally. So as an organization, this is our vision, that only working together, finding the roots of the problems, understanding them locally, but also taking them to the global level and seeing how together we can make sure that problem is solved. And there are so many, but again, at this point, all we want is victory for Ukraine. We want peace and prosperity for this country. And of course, we are very thankful as an organization. We're very thankful to all American people who are supporting us. We're supporting Ukraine through our organization. And we just want to say, keep supporting, because the war is not over. And there's going to be a lot to do when Ukraine wins.
Thank you so much. And you really did bring up those important 5 Ps that exist in the future we want and the 2030 agenda. That, of course, begins with people, as you said, prosperity, partnership, planet, and most importantly, peace for all. So we know SDG 16 is absolutely essential. We thank you for the work that you do on a daily basis. And thank you for sharing your story today here on ThinkTech Hawaii.
Thank you so much, Josh. It was great to be here.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.